Hi, Dr. Cologne. Okay, so I'm gonna get started. I'm just gonna be splitting up my screen a little bit. So if I'm not exactly looking in the camera, I'm just like looking back and forth between the questions and like the diagrams and stuff like that, but in my notes and everything. Okay, so starting off with question number 5. The question was to identify the components of the blood pressure equipment that are labeled, and parts A was the answer to that was the control valve, and part C was the diaphragm. So for those two, I didn't really put an answer, and I missed the question because I was like unaware of like the parts that were important to taking the blood pressure. I honestly thought that it was only important to know how to take it, like on a patient. So I didn't know that, like, I didn't necessarily like was aware that learning and understanding the different parts of the stethoscope were important. So to answer that, the function of the pressure control valve is important for maintaining a set of pressure in part of the circuit and keeping pressure safely below the upper limit. And the diaphragm is used to pick up sounds with higher frequencies. So that's question number 5. Question number 6. I'm just going to scroll down real quick. Okay, so the question for that one is, are the readings normal or abnormal for percent saturation and heart rate? So looking at like the diagrams or like the pictures that were given, excuse me, the first part of the answer was normal on the O2 saturation of 89% and the heart rate of 79 beats per minute. And the second part of the O2 saturation was 76%, which was too low, making it abnormal. However, the heart rate of the 69 beats per minute was normal. I didn't necessarily specify like what was normal and what was abnormal, so like that's kind of like why I got like the answers. That's why I got partial credit. Um, and what's it called? And the reason why I missed that section was because I knew the heartbeat, like how many like beats per minute, like how much it was supposed to be like within like what range and everything. However, as far as like the O2 saturation, like I couldn't like pinpoint it. Like, okay, so like what was like right or wrong and stuff like that. So I was literally like unsure. Um so basically, that's why like I missed it. So I did learn that the O2 saturation indicates the amount of oxygen traveling through the body and with traveling through the body with the red blood cells. And normal O2 saturation is between 95% and 100%. So that's that for question number 6. Question number 7. You're supposed to identify the torsal models. So the correct answer for both parts was the left great saphenous vein and the thoracic duct. I put down the inferior iliac vein and the left brachiocephalic vein. I knew there had to be veins. It was pretty obvious. So like as far as like the location was, I was completely off, obviously. So the reason why I went for like inferior was because I was like, okay, it's obviously like below, like within like the torso area. So I was trying to like really come up with like trying to like put the pieces together, but obviously I was completely off. So that's why I put down inferior iliac vein. And I also wrote down, okay, so however, like the great saphenous vein is obviously like was even further below the left iliac vein. And then for the second portion, I put down the left brachiocephalic vein because it is recognized, because I recognized and saw, what is it? Oh my God, I'm sorry. Okay, so I recognized, saw that the left internal jugular vein was right in front of the branches of the aortic arch. And I missed the green structure that was right behind it, which was the thoracic duct. And then, so that was my fault. So basically, the great saphenous vein is the largest vein in the body that runs along the length of the lower limb, returning the blood from the foot, left, and the thigh to the deep femoral vein at the femoral triangle. It's a lot of work. I'm sorry. I'm so out of breath. I can't. And the thoracic duct is on the 12th thoracic vertebrae, and it extends to the root of the neck. So, and its function is to drain the blood circulation at the ends, at the junction of the left subclavian and internal jugular veins. Ooh. Okay, so then I also missed question number 18, and I'm just gonna scroll through the diagrams real quick. Just give me a second. Okay, so the question for that one was to identify the capillaries on the capillary on the slide. The answer was either B or C, but the answer that I put down was A. And when I looked at it, I kind of like I was like thinking about like how the capillaries like exchange oxygen and nutrients for like the carbon dioxide and wastes. So when I saw all of like, when I saw like all of like those cells within diagram like the picture A, I was like, okay, this has to be like maybe like the waste and stuff like that. But then but then it was just like, wait a minute, they're blood cells. So that's why I got that like wrong. So realizing that capillaries, I learned that also the capillaries are tiny blood vessels that have thin walls, and they do allow exchange between the blood and the interstitial fluid. Question number 19, that one was which type of blood vessel is shown on the slide. The answer was an elastic artery, but I put down smooth muscle as my answer. And the reason why I did that was because when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, I was looking at the tunica media, and it looked for me, and for me, it looked like a muscle instead of an elastic artery. So I was like, okay, let me just kind of like put down that answer instead. However, the difference between that, the elastic arteries and the muscular one, is that the elastic arteries are nearest to the heart and have more elastic fibers and less smooth muscle in their tunica media, while the muscular arteries have fewer elastic fibers and smooth muscle. So like when looking at the diagram, I was like, okay, obviously it's a like, the like you could tell like the difference within like between those two, and it kind of like makes sense. So for question number 20, the question was to identify the vessels on the slide. So part A, the answers to that was, on part A was the vein slash venule, part B was the lymphatic vessel, and part C was the artery or arteriole. So my answers that I put down for artery was for my answers, for part A, I put down artery. For part B, I put down vein. And then for the smooth muscle, I put down for part C. So, okay, so this is very interesting. Okay. So because the pressure of the wall of the arteries are much thicker than the veins, I was thinking that they were the same for as far as like the diameter. So like I kind of like thought the diameter was the same as like the thickness of like the veins. So that's where like I got like kind of like I switched the answers like incorrectly and stuff. And then for part C, I put down what did I put for part C again? Okay, I put down part C for smooth muscle, because I was looking at like the smooth portion of the tunica media. So I was like, okay, it looks smooth. So I like, kind of like, I was like, okay, this has to be smooth muscle fibers, but I missed that. So regarding the tunica media, the vessel walls of the veins are thinner than the arteries. They also have an irregular shape and appear like floppy. And regarding the lymphatic vessel, they closely resemble veins with the beaded appearance, with the bulging fluid between the valves, all while containing a thin layer of smooth muscle. Question number 21 was to identify the structures on the heart model. So the second part of the question was the coronary sinus, but I put down the circumflex. So I knew that both arteries wrapped itself around the heart. However, what I missed were the roles of two arteries. And this could have helped me like answer the question correctly had I like understood that 100%. So the circumflex artery branches off the left coronary artery and encircles like the heart muscle and supplies blood to the outer side and back of the heart, while the coronary sinus collects venous blood and drains deoxygenated blood from the heart while directly into the right atrium of the heart. Question number 24, that was to identify the blood vessel model. So the answer to that was for the elastic artery. So the answer to that was the elastic artery. That was for part A. And the answer that I put down was smooth muscle. Again, I was like looking at the tunica media and it appeared to look like smooth muscle appearance. However, because this looked like it was like part of like an artery, due to the location of a semilunar valve being the heart, that's how I got the answer wrong. So I didn't like put two and two together because, I'm dumb, but not really, I guess, I don't know. But Arteries receive blood directly from the heart, and the three layers that are made up of the inner layer, which is the inner layer, which is the intima. You got the middle layer, which is the tunica media, and outer layer, which is called the adventitia. Excuse me. So the media is a layer of muscle that lets arteries handle the high pressure from the heart. Okay, so question number 25. We're supposed to name the blood vessel models. So the answer for part D was the tunica intima of the muscular artery. And the answer that I gave was a smooth capillary. So from part C, I was aware that it was smooth muscle. So part of me was trying to like put like an educated guess. Okay, like that if that's an outer layer of smooth muscle, then that small portion would probably be a capillary. I was like literally like thinking, like going from like big to smaller and smaller and smaller. So I was like, okay, that has to be like a small portion. So maybe like that's the capillary and everything, but it's like but it's like zoomed in, like based on the model. Like that's what I was thinking. So the more I was reviewing it, like the more I realized that the tunica intima is the tunica intima of the muscular artery. So it's the innermost layers that consist of smooth muscle cells intermingled with elastic fibers. And it's created from endothelium cells, and it is direct contact with the blood. So that's what was for question number 25. So question number 27 was to identify the structures of flat Stanley. And the correct answer on part E was the left internal jugular vein, while the answer I put was the external jugular vein. So I should have been like more specific as far as like if it was a left or right. So that was my fault. But I did know that it was a jugular vein. So because it was connected to like the head, which I knew was like how like it collects blood from like around that area, like the skull and the brain and parts of the face and stuff. But I wasn't like I was obviously like wrong. Okay, like because I figured that if it was the external jugular vein, it would be like closer to like kind of like closer to like the outer portion, like where the vertebrae was, and that's why I got it wrong. So the jugular veins are found in the neck. But the left internal jugular vein overlaps the common carotid artery. And again, the function is to collect blood from the skull, the brain, parts of the face, and the majority of the neck. So that's question number 27. And question number 28 was to label the heart models. So the correct answer given for the letter F was the right coronary artery, but the answer I put was the atrioventricular artery. So, okay. So when I saw the artery wrapping itself like near the atria of the heart, I kept thinking, okay, it must have a term with like having to do with the atrioventricular area because it's between like kind of like around the atria, like around like the auricle and the right ventricle. So I was like, okay, it has to be like, around the area, but I was obviously confused between the two, so that's how I got the answer wrong. So the atrioventricular valve are those that connect the atrium to the ventricles, while its function is to close and prevent the blood from flowing back into the atria when the ventricles contract. And the right coronary artery supplies the blood to the right ventricle, the right atrium, and the SA and the AB nodes, and emerges from the aorta into the AV groove. So that's question 28. So question number 29, we were supposed to figure out if the EKGs were normal, and if they weren't, we had to identify what was abnormal. So for part E, the answer was no, and it was because it was sinus bradycardia, and the answer that I put down was that it was normal. And the reason why I put it was normal was because I was able to recognize the QRS complex. I was able to see the atria contract. I was able to see the ventricle contract. However, I didn't realize that like there was like actual slower heart rate. So that's how I got it wrong. So sinus bradycardia is a slow heartbeat, and the heartbeat starting in the SA node is normal, but at a slow ventricular rate of less than 60 beats per minute after the QRS complex. So that's where I messed up. Okay, so question number 30. We're supposed to identify the heart models. So the answer for part F was the left auricle, and I put down the left atrium. So I was kind of like on the right track because I knew it had to have been like around the area because around where the auricle was, it was like, okay, like I had the right idea that it was based on that like location. However, I was like wrong on like the actual like specific, location of like that model. So oracles have a conical muscular pouch that arise from the atrium. So it increases the blood holding capacity of the atrium and is composed of an irregular space, while the atrium refers to the upper chambers of the heart and supply blood to the ventricles and are composed of a smooth surface. So that's where that was for question number 30. Question number 31, we're supposed to name the heart models. So the answer given for part A was the bundle branch, but I put down the bundle of His. So I was kind of like, I knew kind of like the structure, like, okay, like, as far as like the electrical signals, like, where they travel from like the different types of nodes and stuff like that. However, like I was so focused on like the heart signals that I mistaken it for the bundle of His instead of bundle branches. So that was my fault. But I did learn and realize that the bundle branches are part of the electrical system of the heart, and it conducts electrical activity from the bundle of His down to the Purkinje network. And while the bundle of His carry electrical signals from the AV node to the bundled branches. Yeah, so it does that. Okay. So question number 32. So upset about this. I was so mad. Okay, so question number 32, it's asking what's the normal blood pressure range. And the numbers that I gave, like the range was correct. Let me see, I'm sorry. The answers for that one, because I don't want to like get it like, because I know it, but I don't want to like, I'm being doubtful. Okay, so the correct range was between 90 to 120 milligrams. Excuse me, what was it called? Oh my God. Oh, millimeters of mercury, excuse me. For the systolic, and then for diastolic is 60 to 80 millimeters per mercury. So I got the numbers correct, but the problem that I missed was the units. So, and the reason why was because I was so focused on memorizing the numbers. Okay, like don't forget them, like like what the range is supposed to be, that I knew like the systolic and the diastolic like numbers, but unfortunately like I missed out on the actual units itself, which was like the most important part. So because it's like, okay, so it's what was it? So it's 90 and 120 what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So the millimeters of mercury are abbreviated mmHg, and it's a standard unit of measurement for pressure. And the measurements are in general given relative to the current atmospheric pressure. So that's the question number 32. Question number 35, last one. That one. Okay, so this one we had to identify the white blood cell on the slide. The correct answer was a monocyte, and I put down basophil as the answer. And the thing is, I was looking at the cell, and I remembered the word "phil" like in basophil, and I was like, okay, so basically it feels like majority of the cell, but I was also remembering like, because there's also like the red dotted portions that surround it as well, and I obviously am like, couldn't like, I obviously like missed it, so like I thought that that there was like red portions of it surrounding like the within the cell and everything. So I mistaken that for a basophil instead of a monocyte. And the monocytes are a type of white blood cell that are the largest type of leukocyte. And it can differentiate into like macrophages and the conventional dendritic cells. So that's how I got that question wrong. So yeah, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity, doctor. I appreciate it.